William Thompson raised his champagne glass and mocked loudly so everyone could hear, pointing at the black woman, who had just dropped a crystal tray on the ballroom floor. The sharp crash of breaking glass silenced the 200 wealthy guests at the skyscraper launch party. All eyes turned to Kesha Williams, 35, who had only been working as a cleaner at the event for 3 weeks. "Dad, that's ridiculous," whispered Jonathan Thompson, 28, embarrassed by his father's cruel words. But William ignored him, fueled by arrogance and too much whiskey. "This woman can't even clean properly. Let's test if she can move to music. Play a waltz. If she dances better than my wife, I'll marry my son to her right here," he declared, as if making a law. The room erupted with cruel laughter. Some women covered their mouths in fake shock, while others smirked. The men shook their heads as if enjoying a tasteless joke. Kesha stayed on her knees, picking up the glass, but her calm eyes told a different story. She wasn't humiliated. She was thinking, calculating. Then she stood, wiped her hands on her apron, and looked straight at William. "I accept," she said clearly, her voice cutting through the noise. The hall fell silent. Even the orchestra stopped. "What did you just say?" William asked, shaken for the first time. "I accept your challenge," Kesha repeated, with a faint smile that unsettled some guests. "But when I dance better than your wife, you must keep your word, joke or not." Laughter grew louder. People thought they were about to see the most humiliating scene of the year. But no one noticed the spark in Kesha's eyes. The same spark that once lit up the world's grandest stages, before tragedy stole everything. Victoria Thompson, William's wife, stepped forward with a smug smile. She was known for teaching Manhattan's elite ballroom dancing. "Do I really have to lower myself to this?" she said coldly. "Don't be modest," William grinned. "You won the Waltz Club trophy last year. This will be easy." Kesha stood silent, lost in memory. 15 years ago, she was Kesha Morrow, the star ballerina of the American National Ballet. She had once made audiences rise in standing ovation, critics comparing her to legends. Then came the accident, a special performance, a car crash on the way home, 3 months in a coma. Doctors said she'd be lucky to walk again. Her career was over. William turned to his son. "Jonathan, get the camera. I want this recorded the night a cleaning lady pretended to be a dancer at my party." Jonathan hesitated. "Dad, this is too much." "She was just doing her job." "She accepted," William snapped. "Or do you want me to remind your girlfriend about last week?" Jonathan's face went pale. Kesha understood William controlled everyone with threats. "Put on the music," William ordered the DJ, "and place your bets. $500 if you bet on my wife. 1,000 if you're bold enough to bet on the cleaning lady." William laughed, and the crowd joined in cruelly. Some guests actually started throwing money in, treating it like a circus. Victoria stepped to the center of the dance floor, stretching dramatically, showing off her experience. William turned to Kesha with a mocking grin. "When you lose and you will lose, you'll get down on your knees. Apologize for wasting everyone's time. And of course, you're fired." Something shifted in Kesha's eyes. It was the same fire that once carried her across the world's greatest stages. The same strength that had pushed her through endless physical therapy. The same dignity that had kept her alive after losing everything. "Mr. Thompson," she said calmly, her voice unsettling a few people nearby. "When I win and I will win, you'll keep your word about the marriage. But I also want something else." William raised his eyebrows, amused. "Oh, she's making demands now. Go ahead, what else?" "I want you to admit, in front of everyone here, that you judged a woman wrongly because of her skin color and her job. And I want a public apology." The room grew tense. Guests whispered nervously. This was no longer just a game. William let out a mocking laugh. "You've got nerve. Fine. But when you embarrass yourself, you'll walk out of here without a job and without dignity. What he didn't realize was that he wasn't facing a cleaning lady anymore. He was facing a woman who had already lost everything once and survived. Victoria was warming up with basic dance steps, but Kesha stood perfectly still, her mind sharp and focused. 15 years of struggle had forged her into someone far stronger than anyone in that room could understand. She probably never even stepped on a dance floor, one guest whispered. This is humiliating. Meanwhile, William strutted around, collecting bets like a predator, feeding on the humiliation. 500 says she can't last a whole song. 1,000 she run off before it's over. The crowd roared with laughter, but Kesha noticed something William didn't. His son Jonathan wasn't laughing. He stood against the wall, looking deeply uncomfortable. She remembered seeing him weeks ago. He was the only executive who treated the workers with kindness. Just then, a quiet voice spoke beside her. She turned to see a black man in his 60s, wearing a security uniform. He leaned in, pretending to check his radio. I'm Marcus, head of security. Been here 20 years. I saw you dance before. 15 years ago at the National Theatre. Kesha Morrow, principal dancer. Her heart skipped. Someone had recognized her. After years of hiding her identity, surviving in the shadows, someone finally knew. I thought you died in that accident, Marcus whispered, his eyes full of disbelief and respect. The papers said you'd never dance again. The papers said many things, Kesha replied quietly. Not all of them were true. Marcus nodded, glancing at William, who was still laughing with the crowd. What they did to you back then was wrong. And what he's doing now, it's even worse. Kesha felt something shift inside. Her decision. She had been avoiding for 15 years. Not just about dancing, but about reclaiming who she really was. Marcus, she said softly, I need a favor. After I dance, no matter what happens, record everything that follows, especially their reactions. Marcus frowned, unsure, but then nodded. I will, but why? Kesha smiled for the first time that night. Some people need to learn that judging someone by how they look can become the costliest mistake of their lives. But William wasn't done humiliating. Kesha, he raised his voice so everyone could hear. Let's make this even better. If she finishes the song without tripping or stopping, I'll give her $1,000. But when she fails, sand, she will fail she. Clean this entire room on her knees in front of us all. The crowd reacted with uneasy laughter. A few guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, realizing this had gone too far. But no one dared to challenge William. Dad, Jonathan said again, trying to stop him. This is too much. Quiet, Jonathan, William snapped. You're too soft. That's why you need to see how the real world works. There's a natural order, and people like her, he pointed at Kesha, must learn their place. But Kesha didn't flinch. She began to move not to the dance floor yet, but to stretch her body in small, controlled motions. Most people didn't notice, but Marcus did. His eyes widened. These weren't random movements. They were the same warm-up stretches she had once done before every performance at the National Theatre. My God, Marcus whispered. She's really going to do this. Sensing the shift in attention, Victoria quickly stepped forward. Start the music, she said coldly. Let's end this nonsense. The DJ, clearly uncomfortable, pressed play. A classical waltz filled the air. Victoria began her routine, moving with decent grace, but nothing extraordinary. She had learned her steps in expensive clubs, guided by private teachers, but her movements lacked the depth and artistry of a true dancer. Still, the crowd clapped politely, because she represented what they approved of: wealthy, white, trained in the best social circles. Well done, darling, William said loudly, clapping with exaggerated pride. Now it's time for our guest. Kesha stepped forward slowly, walking to the center of the floor. Each step carried weight, control, and a quiet dignity that made some guests shift uncomfortably. She didn't look like someone about to lose. "What song would you like?" the DJ asked out of courtesy. "The same one," Kesha replied calmly. William chuckled. "Oh, she wants a second chance. How sweet. Fine, play it from the top. Let's see how long she lasts before giving up." But what no one knew was that Kesha had chosen this song on purpose. She had danced this waltz hundreds of times, her body carrying the rhythm in its very memory. More than that, it was the last piece she had performed before the accident. On a night when she had earned a standing ovation at the National Theatre, critics had called that performance one of the most moving and unforgettable in American dance history. As the first notes began, Kesha closed her eyes. Her mind traveled back 15 years, to that night when she felt weightless on stage, when every note became part of her soul, when she knew, without question, that she was born to dance. The doctors had sworn she'd never dance again. The media had written her off, calling her career finished. And for years, Kesha herself had believed it. But little by little, through pain and persistence, she rebuilt her body. She never returned to the stage, never tried to reclaim her fame, but in secret, in lonely rooms, during the hardest nights of her life, she kept dancing. And now, in this hall full of arrogance and prejudice, that secret was about to be revealed. As the music began, her hands positioned with such precision that even the musicians exchanged puzzled glances. Something about her movements told them this was no amateur. They didn't know it yet, but they were about to witness the return of a legend. The first bars of the waltz filled the room, and Kesha started moving, not with clumsy steps as they expected, but with such grace that the air itself seemed to shift around her. At first, her movements were restrained, almost cautious, keeping the audience's expectations low. But as the music swelled, her body answered it with growing power. Each step flowed into the next, every turn sharp, every gesture filled with emotion so raw it held the room captive. William Thompson stopped laughing. Victoria's smug smile vanished. The guests, one by one, realized they weren't watching a cleaning lady fumbling through a dance. They were watching an artist reclaim her soul. "My God," someone whispered. "She's exceptional." Kesha launched into a sequence of pirouettes that would challenge even the finest ballerina, then soared into a grand jeet that seemed to defy gravity. This wasn't ballroom dancing. It was ballet of the highest level, seamlessly woven into the rhythm of the waltz. Marcus, as promised, filmed everything: the dance, but more importantly, the faces of the guests. William's expression, in particular, shifted from arrogance to disbelief, and then to something close to fear. "This is impossible," William muttered under his breath. "Who is this woman?" When Kesha moved into her signature sequence, the one she had once unveiled at the National Theatre, a unique blend of classical mastery and her own innovation recognition sparked in the room. "Wait," said a woman in the audience, a longtime patron of the arts. "I know those steps. I've seen that before. But where?" Meanwhile, Jonathan couldn't look away, his camera capturing every second. Unlike his father, he didn't care who she was supposed to be. He knew genius when he saw it. As the music surged toward its climax, Kesha spun into a breathtaking series of fouette's turns, so demanding they required a lifetime of training. The audience froze in stunned silence. When the music ended, she struck her final pose. Unshaken, her chin lifted in quiet defiance. Her breathing was steady, her dignity unshakable. For a moment, there was only silence. The kind of silence that comes when people witness something greater than anything they expected. Then, one clap, another, within seconds. The entire hall was on its feet, applause exploding until it shook the windows. "Bravo," someone shouted. "Extraordinary," cried another. William Thompson turned pale, humiliated in front of Manhattan's elite, the very people whose respect he craved most. That's when Marcus stepped forward, his phone still recording. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "allow me to introduce Kesha Moreau, former principal, soloist of the American National Ballet." The name thundered across the room. Gasps, shocked cries, disbelief rippled through the audience. "Kesha Moreau," Victoria stammered. "That's impossible. She's dead. Or at least, she never danced again." Kesha looked directly at her and spoke for the first time since finishing. "Clearly, the rumors of my death have been greatly exaggerated." The crowd laughed in surprise, but William Thompson wasn't laughing anymore. The truth of what had just happened hit William like a train. He had embarrassed one of the greatest performers in American history and, worse, it was all caught on video. Marcus held up his phone and reminded him, "You said if she danced better than your wife, you would marry her to your son. Everyone here saw it, and we all know she more than proved herself." Jonathan, realizing how far things had gone, stepped toward Kesha. "Miss Morrow," he said softly, "I want to apologize for my father's behavior. It was wrong and inexcusable." "Jonathan, shut up," William shouted, finally losing all control. "You will not apologize to anyone, especially not to her." That was when Kesha calmly revealed her real plan. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice steady, "I believe we have a marriage proposal to discuss. A man of your reputation surely keeps his word, doesn't he?" The room fell silent. Everyone realized this was no longer just about a dance. "You must be out of your mind if you think I'll honor a drunken joke." William snapped, trying to sound strong but clearly desperate. "It wasn't a joke," Kesha replied with a knowing smile. "Marcus, would you play the recording?" Marcus lifted his phone, and the room filled with William's own voice making the bet, raising the stakes, and confirming that he would marry his son to Kesha if she won. The audience began to murmur, some laughing nervously, others shaking their heads in disbelief. "That's blackmail," William shouted. "No," Kesha corrected, still calm. "This is accountability. You made a clear bet in front of hundreds of witnesses. Now you must decide if your word means anything or if your reputation is worth less than your prejudice." Jonathan stepped closer to Kesha. "Miss Mo," he said, "if you'll allow me, I'd like to keep my father's word. Not because I have to, but because any man would be lucky to marry someone with your strength and dignity." Gasps filled the room. No one had expected this turn. William shook with rage. "Jonathan, if you do this, you're out of the company, out of the family, out of everything." "Then so be it," Jonathan replied, extending his hand to Kesha. "Some things are more important than money, like integrity." Kesha looked at his hand, then at the crowd, then at William, who looked like he was falling apart in front of everyone. "Mr. Thompson," she said firmly, 15 years ago, people like you decided I was worthless because I wasn't perfect anymore. Tonight, you tried to shame me again because of my skin color and the work I do to survive. But here's what I've learned. True nobility doesn't come from money or inheritance. It comes from how we treat people when we think no one is watching." She turned to Jonathan. "Your son has learned that lesson, even if you haven't. As for marriage," she smiled, "I'll accept dinner with him. But marriage, that's something to people decide with love and respect, not through humiliating bets." The audience erupted into applause, this time not just for her dance, but for her dignity and wisdom. William, realizing he had lost everything, his bet, his pride, and the respect of his own son, muttered something about leaving it to the lawyers before storming out. His wife, Victoria, followed, clearly humiliated. Marcus stopped recording and walked up to Kesha with a grin. "This will be very interesting once it hits social media." And he was right. Within 24 hours, the clip had gone viral. Millionaire Humiliates legendary ballerina became a worldwide trending topic, with millions of views and angry comments. By the next morning, William's empire was crumbling. His company had lost millions in contracts overnight. His business partners demanded an emergency meeting. Victoria locked herself in her room, refusing to be seen in public. In his office, surrounded by newspapers with brutal headlines, William sat pale and shaken. "Dad," Jonathan said quietly, "the board has voted. You have 1 hour to resign or they'll remove you by force." William looked at his son and, for the first time, saw not obedience but strength. "You did this," he muttered bitterly. "No," Jonathan replied firmly. "You did this to yourself the moment you chose arrogance over humanity." While William stood in silence, Kesha's life was transforming. Offers poured in from all over the world. 3 major ballet companies wanted her to choreograph performances. Lincoln Center invited her for a solo event. Even Hollywood producers reached out, hoping to turn her story into a film. But the offer that touched her heart most came from her former students at the community school. They had gathered all their savings, just $23, and offered it to her as a scholarship, so she could return to teaching. Kesha accepted with tears in her eyes. "But only on one condition," she said. "Let's make this something bigger." 6 months later, the Kesha Mororo Center for the Arts opened in the heart of Manhattan. Donations from around the world had poured in after her story went viral. Jonathan Thompson, now running the family business with a focus on social responsibility, became the first major donor. William, however, had lost everything: his company, his reputation, and his family. Victoria divorced him and left for Europe. He ended up working as a low-level consultant at a small firm, a broken shadow of the powerful man he once was. At the grand opening of the center, Marcus watched Kesha teaching a room full of smiling, diverse children. "You know what impresses me most?" he said softly. "This isn't just a victory over prejudice. It's proof of how true nobility responds to cruelty." Kesha, now celebrated again as one of the greatest artists of her generation, looked at her new students practicing their first ballet steps. She smiled and said, "Sometimes we have to lose everything to discover who we really are. And sometimes people must lose everything to realize who they should never have tried to be." Jonathan walked up with flowers from the garden he had planted around the center. "Ready for dinner?" he asked, offering his arm. "Ready?" she replied, taking not just his arm, but the life she had rebuilt from the ashes of her past. Kesha's greatest revenge wasn't in destroying William. It was in creating something so inspiring that his cruelty became meaningless. She proved that when we face prejudice with dignity and respond to hate with excellence, we don't just win, we change the world. What about you? Have you ever faced someone who tried to crush your dreams because of prejudice? Share your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that show the best way to respond to doubt is to be extraordinary.